In this episode, we're going to look through a crystal ball to explore Ireland's future and expose some of the very real choices we can make today that can shape our society and the lifestyles we'll experience tomorrow. Learning from modern science and technology empowers us with an advantage of already knowing now some of the big challenges we face and some of the compelling opportunities the future could bring. In this programme, we'll be looking at a future some of us will never see, some will live through, and some will be born into. By 2050, we'll have over 1/3 more people on the planet and a tripling of the middle classes, all competing for the same finite resources, already stressed beyond the limits of our planetary boundaries. As we've learned in a previous episode, all the science agrees that to have a chance of avoiding what's considered very dangerous climate change within this century, we'll have to incrementally reduce greenhouse gas emissions down to 1/10 of what they are today by 2050. What's clear is, to enjoy the same quality of life we have today, we urgently need to start taking steps now to shape the future we've all come to expect. I went to meet a new research team who've been looking at the challenges for Ireland's future in a cross-discipline project called Consensus 2050. Anna, thanks for inviting me here today. Can you tell me about the Consensus programme and why you're actually doing this research?
Well, there are a series of major challenges that we're going to face in terms of living in a way which we would wish to live, I think, in a way which is fair, which is just, which is sustainable, and sustainable being socially acceptable, economically vibrant, and environmentally secure. The challenges really revolve around the integration of those three issues. So whether that be in terms of ensuring people have jobs, houses over their heads, that we have water to drink, and that we have food to eat.
And in the context of 2050, why have you chosen 2050?
2050 was chosen as a time which is far enough into the future, which allows us to think about doing things significantly differently from the way that we do things now. But it's also close enough that people can think about maybe living in 2050 or their children living in 2050.
We can achieve some of our basic needs for shelter, for heating in the homes, for lighting, in ways that are much more sustainable and are less wasteful of energy use. We can see that population is growing. More and more people want to live lifestyles that consume lots of natural resources. So we need to figure out how we're going to plan for that and create a planned and smart transition to more sustainable lifestyles rather than let things unfold as the way we're going at the moment.
If we see food shortages, for example, we're suddenly reliant on a very narrow range of products that we actually grow and cultivate here in Ireland. We're always selling ourselves as a huge exporter of food, that we grow so much food, we're famous for our agriculture, but we're also a huge importer of food as well. And I suppose that is something that is important to remember in terms of the risks that might be associated with that.
And we need to start thinking about, for example, reducing car-based transport very dramatically. I think we need to focus on health-related issues. When we talk about transport, we need to talk about issues of walkability, but also perhaps obesity, sedentary lifestyle. We also need to think about issues around social justice. Where are people based at the moment? What sort of land use patterns do we have? We need to focus on that too. Otherwise, things will get worse. We can't just focus on road construction as the only solution, because we know now from international and national experience that that attracts more traffic, that people move further and further away from their places of work, and that is really not an option at this point in time.
Projections and trends show that 3/4 of the world and Ireland's population will be living in cities by 2050. Effectively doubling the number of people living in cities within the next 35 years. So I decided to start my journey in a place that's now well regarded as the world's smartest city. I think really Austria is about 20 years ahead of us. They've been doing this for a long time. They've learned a lot in that time. They've seen the successes of what they've achieved so far, and they're able to now move ahead with much more confidence in tackling the issues of 2050. When I was working here as an architect in the late 1970s, Austria had a huge environmental crisis with water pollution and acid rain as a result of their booming manufacturing sector. In the decades since then, Austria has rebuilt its environment, infrastructure and reputation, and focused so strongly on sustainability that they're now an economic powerhouse, almost invulnerable to any of the looming global crises that we in Ireland leave ourselves so exposed to. I decided to return to Vienna to find out what we can learn from their vision and preparations for life in 2050, and what it's like to live today in the world's smartest city. Standing 21 floors over the Danube Canal is the world's first passive house standard high-rise building. A passive house is a building that has virtually zero energy demand for heating, cooling, lighting and power. Christian, tell me what's special about this new office building here in Vienna.
The most special thing is that it is the worldwide first passive high-rising building.
So how do you cool this building?
In the bottom we have a combined heat and power plant, which is driven by biogas. This power plant produces electricity on the one hand and heating on the other hand. The power plant is not the only source for heat and cool energy. We also use the Danube River for cooling in summer. Take the water, the cold water, use it for cooling and give it back to the river.
Even in the depths of the Austrian winter, this building will have a near-zero heating bill. As the designers have planned for climate change and a warmer world in the future, the innovative technology here is geared towards how they ventilate and cool the building in the summer. 20 stories up, I took a walk through the glazed service cavity of the skin of the building.
Something very interesting about this passive building is that first of all, you've got the triple glazed windows here on this side. So this is really the main envelope of the building in terms of the exterior. Right along these glass panes here, there are gaps. That allows air into this space. And these ducts then circulated right up through all the different floors. And this allows ventilation for all of the office floors where you can open the windows if you want to. Really interesting technology. If you look at this building now, right through the 21st century, how will this be saving them? How much money will it save them?
Yeah, per year they will save 300,000 euros.
300,000 euros every year?
Every year, yeah.
Really?
Means they earn.
Every year 300,000?
Yeah,
okay, well banks love saving money. What I really like about this building is that it's, first of all, the tallest and biggest sustainable building that I've ever been in. But what really impresses me is that someone in the bank ran the figures and saw the sustainable option made the most sense.
Vienna has a lot to be confident about as a vibrant city with a colourful past. It attracts tourists who've all come to peep into a world of historic opulence and grandeur. But that's not the Vienna I'm here to explore. Here, at the new Grand Central Station at the heart of the city, an old industrial area is being redeveloped with very high-density urban renewal, providing housing for 14,000 more people. What makes this development unique is the huge focus on low-energy or passive house buildings. This is an integrated mixed development with large green open spaces for recreational parks, all on the doorstep of the world's best public transport network, where you can be anywhere in the city in 20 minutes. At a specially constructed viewing tower and citizens' information centre, I met with Andreas Schwab to find out why the people of Vienna are getting in line to catch a glimpse of their future.
So how do you attract people to live in the city?
I think Vienna has a high quality in standards. The people want to go to Vienna, to come to Vienna. They want to live in the city. They don't want to leave the city, to live on the countryside. Vienna wants to be a city of short distances. So the distance from from the flat you're living to the work should be short, or the time you use to go there should be a short time. Using
walking.
the public transports, for example.
So really the whole of this community, the next generation, can live here in this part of the without having to move out in the suburbs.
Yeah.
That's
this
really
is the
important.
sense. This is the sense. It is a good quality of living here because of the park, because of the infrastructure. There will be buses, new bus lines. Old tram lines will be along through the whole area, so you can go with the tram to the city.
Visiting the viewing tower really brought home to me how actively involved the Viennese are about public participation. This enables citizens to interact with the city authorities and engage in the planning process to shape their future city. I met Wolfgang Forster to find out how the planners had managed to get the backing of the local community.
Wolfgang, this is a major urban redevelopment that's taking place here. What are the big vision that you've got here?
Our big vision is to provide good and affordable housing for families, but all types of families, right in the city center.
Right, so you've full mix, all
Yes.
age groups, everything.
Yes,
all social
that's
groups.
what we're trying to achieve. And what is very important for us is the green areas, because you see Vienna is a very dense city. People are used to live in a very dense environment, multi-story buildings, not their own gardens. So we must provide a lot of public green. Vienna has this very long tradition of social housing, started in the 1920s. And since then, actually, most of the new construction has been going on in this public area. We only get a building permission for the residential buildings if we can prove that there is enough school space, enough kindergartens, senior institutions, assisted housing, playgrounds, public areas. All this has to be guaranteed, actually, before we can start to build.
And if you look now to 2050, have you a pathway to 2050?
Well, yes, we have what we call the smart city concept, and that is, of course, much more than buildings, because it also concerns transport, for example, and other things. And so the idea is actually to make it an energy neutral city until 2040, 50.
2040,
Yeah.
energy neutral city
Yes.
by then.
Yes. The reason why we want to do this is, of course, one is climate protection. Very clear we have our international obligations, and Vienna has signed all these treaties, so we are actually obliged to do this. But the other thing, of course, is also that energy costs money. And one of our main goals actually is to provide affordable housing. So buildings like these, for example, the energy bills here will be 1/3 of in buildings like this. So it also helps to save money for the private households.
By Austrian standards, we in Ireland have to make fundamental changes now to prepare ourselves for 2050. But what I've seen here convinced me there is a roadmap that makes a very compelling case.
So if you take the vision that you've got here and the citizens have here for their city, how could that be applied to Ireland? Could we have a similar vision? What could we do?
In Austria, in general, environmental issues, climate protection, energy saving have become a very important part of a broad public debate, which actually forces politicians to react.
Vienna really is competing hard to win over car drivers and make public transport the preferred mode of choice. My experience in the city of short distances convinced me they could deliver on their vision.
I think it was 10 or 15 years ago, cars were number one in the means of transport in Vienna. But now, public transport is with 39%, it's number one.
Is everything kind of integrated? In other words, can you go from the tram to the metro to the bus?
That's a very, very important thing that you get with one ticket or one pass throughout the whole system. So if you stamp one ticket here, you can go through the whole city. You can go by tram, you can go by bus, you can go by regional train. You can use any means of transport that's necessary for your trip.
An unlimited year pass here costs €365. That's €1 per day for all public transport. As so many people are using the network now, they can afford to install smart new systems to make your travel more comfortable.
We need to get the air conditioning to detect how many people are in there and to manage to level that. So
Right.
if the tram's empty, for example,
it goes off.
it goes off.
The city of Vienna has a very clear focus to move to renewable clean energy for all their heat and electricity needs. The city's heating is provided through a district heating network, sourced from waste to energy, biogas from city food waste, and biomass combined heat and power plants. One novel idea is to democratize power, so I went to meet Gudrun from Vienna Energy to find out what this means.
Gudrun, is it true that these solar collectors here are part of a people's power program?
Absolutely. The idea behind is that the people in an urban area do not have the possibility to really contribute actively into the change in energy systems because they don't have their own rooftop. They live in flats. They cannot really influence alone if they want to erect an PV installation or not. Therefore, we came up with this idea to make PV plant where all our citizens could buy a part of it and rent it back to us, and we will do the maintenance and the operation of the power plant for the citizens, and will pay them back kind of an interest rate for their participation for their own PV plant. We think that it is very important to get positive involvement of our citizens. They don't want to be simple consumers of electricity. They want to contribute. They want to be part of the entire system. And therefore we said we have to bring them back. We have to kind of democratize the entire energy system. The success was overwhelming. It only took us 26 hours to sell this enormous, huge power plant.
You're joking.
Yeah, 26
Really?
hours. We had a press conference, and within 26 hours, all panels were sold.
I can't believe it, really.
Yeah.
I mean, people want to do this.
Absolutely.
Yeah.
And they are signing up and on waiting lists, and they wait eagerly for us to find new places where we can erect new power stations for them, for this participation model. Austria have a very high percentage of our energy in Austria comes from renewable sources. More than 2/3 of our electricity is produced by renewable sources. And people really, really have a high wish to have more green energy in the country.
I think this is part of the solution to 2050. You know, if ordinary citizens can participate in such a simple way, instead of putting money in the bank, they can put money in this, and it's much better in terms of the return. So it stacks up in every way. This could be in every town and village in Ireland. If we look at the issues coming down on us with climate change and resource depletion and energy security, all these sort of issues, if citizens engage in the process and start generating energy like this, and it becomes like a mass thing, everybody doing it, well, this is the sort of resilience that we can build into our cities to deal with the challenges that we face in the future. This builds resilience.
If this can happen in Austria, surely our power utilities can create a similar structure in Ireland for new wind farms, where we can all take small shares and benefit from wind farms that have much better returns than these solar PV panels in Austria, and better and safer investments than any bank offers. Besides the city focusing on transforming its existing building fabric and infrastructure to a future-proofed, sustainable model, Vienna is also focusing on how it can accommodate the expansion of its population in a way that avoids urban sprawl. Here, I'm at a brownfield site that looks like an abandoned industrial wasteland, right at the edge of the buzzing capital.
So what I like about this is that before they built anything on this site, a metro station built up here for 13,000 people. They have a tram station here. They have these very wide access here for cycling and for pedestrians. They have all their street lighting in, all the basic infrastructure planned and built. So when people come to live here, they know that this is going to work in terms of transport and sustainability. All the infrastructure's there.
Over at the only building for miles around, here I met Werner Weiss.
I see the metro now raised above the ground, all new, all built recently. So why are you doing this in advance?
Well, you have to consider about 20,000 people are going to live here, and it's impossible to have all of them using their own cars to come into the inner city. It's impossible. So you need to have a public transport to bring them there.
Now I see a huge array of solar collectors here. These are photovoltaic generating electricity.
Yes, exactly. As you can see, we have three parts of the solar devices. All in all, we have 1,300 square meters, and they produce enough energy to supply the whole building with the energy it demands. For heating, for cooling, for electricity, for ventilation, it covers everything that you need to operate this building.
Werner, when I see the massive investment made out here in all the infrastructure, that metro, and these huge area of solar collectors and the passive standards of all the buildings, some people might say that this is a luxury project. Does it stack up financially?
Yes, it does. Of course, it's an investment, and you have to consider of the payback period. But obviously, it reduces energy, which means you save operating costs. And so it's a very simple calculation. It just takes you a couple of years until it paid off. We want to be the template for what can be done in the future. So we are the first one to do such buildings as we did here. And you know, we have people coming from China and from Russia to learn from us, to learn how the city of Vienna develops smart cities and how a smart building in a smart city context looks like. And that's why we are doing this.
There's something I admire about the Austrian ability to consistently plan ahead and make the long-term investments with long-term certainty and gain. The ecological damage they saw in the 70s has made them sensitive to the challenges 2050 will bring. They're actively planning to make sure they meet these challenges head-on. What I learned in Austria was that to build a better future, society and us citizens need to demand change. In Ireland, we tend to wait for change to happen to us. I went to meet psychologist and Irish Times columnist John Sharry to ask how we in Ireland can take action in shaping our own future.
John, what do you think Ireland is going to be like in 2050?
Like, human civilization is under quite a lot of threats. There's lots of big things going to come down the tracks that are going to challenge everybody and society to the core.
And what sort of big changes?
Well, there's the ones that people have already started to experience. There's the financial and economic problems that are sort of really highlighting the unsustainability of the whole economic system. There's this world population and consumption of resources. That can't go on, that there's going to, the natural limits of the world are being reached. There's energy constraints, which are already at the boundary of oil, natural gas. The thing that I'm most worried about is people are largely unaware of this, or are largely in denial of it. They're not really facing up to it at any collective level, at a political level, while people on the grassroots might be worried about it. There's no leadership around this. There's only an expectation that things will continue. Business as usual is the same. Let's get back on the economic growth model. Without an assumption, actually, no, these things, not only are they not sustainable, they actually cause us to make the problems even worse.
So why are we so resistant to change?
We're all caught up. We're so dependent, so invested in the world of consumption, the world of easy access to resources, that to consider anything else, there's so much resistance to that it's very, very powerful.
And do governments take the same attitude, or politicians, policymakers?
Well, I think policymakers are caught up in the same system, because once a policymaker or a government official gets elected, his first priority is to please the public, isn't it? Is to get re-elected, and the public don't want these changes. They find it very, very hard to envisage.
Is there a kind of a tendency for us to kind of think in a short term rather than take a longer term approach to issues like this, and even for political systems to take a longer look?
Lots of the consequences we're facing are in the future rather than now. Like the coal we're burning now won't damage this generation, but it will sure as hell will damage the next generation. So these things, we tend to put things off because we're quite short-term thinking. So the way around that is you want to inspire people to be long-term thinkers, to thinking about what sort of society do they want their children to live in, what sort of society do they want their grandchildren to live in, like what can they preserve of the future for their children.
All too often, it seems our default position is to defend the status quo that supports the short-term economic model. From today's perspective, we have two very clear choices. We continue with business as usual and leave it to the markets. Or we plan ahead now to build a more resilient future to avoid ecological and social disaster and build the framework for a sustainable future. Ireland in 2050 will be what we the people demand it to be.